All right, it's time for your body and you. What are those things that affect the beautiful specimen that you call a body? And I remember in Sunday school we used to sing this song, your body is a temple that needs the greatest care. It must be clean and wholesome, for God is living there. Let's find out how many of you still clean and wholesome so that God can live in your temple. But this morning, outside of that, we're going to be dealing with some trauma. Probably the trauma of not having a clean body, I don't know. But of course, the trauma that is caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I don't know why Ruckus is just looking at me.
You causing trauma this morning.
Normally, if I say something, the camera would have done, go on him, he over there, Carlos, he over there acting all excited. He was like,
you causing trauma here this morning with that singing. Go ahead with your interview, ma'am.
Listen, my singing is the best. We know, I feel like Michael Jackson when I belting out these notes, Anyways, we have traumatologist and clinical therapist with us this morning, Hanif Benjamin, to talk to us about treating with a trauma as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Good morning to you, Mr. Benjamin.
Blessed good morning to you, Natalie, and to all the people who are viewing and listening wherever in the world.
Yes, and I am sure that a lot of people are definitely going to be interested in this because, as I was saying off air, we can talk about the trauma of contracting COVID, how some people deal with that, or, losing your job as a result of COVID, losing someone dying as a result of COVID. So let's just start with probably the simplest of the three, I don't know, losing your job, losing that ability to provide for yourself as a result of the pandemic. How can somebody cope with that, or what does that trauma even look like?
You see, and what you're speaking about there in your opening is really the context of complex trauma. And that is where you have all of those things combined. So immediately I will take you to the purple onion effect. And if you slice a purple onion, you see the rings around it.
Yeah.
And I like to talk about trauma from that context because it is rings about the losing the job, contracting COVID, family members dying, children at home, and so many things.
So a lot of layers.
Correct.
So you peel off one of losing the job, but you still have to peel off the other of contracting. You still have to peel off the other.
Or they're just all there and they're not going anywhere.
How do you deal with that, though? That seems like a lot.
It is a lot. And I'll tell you this. Somebody told me last week, and it stayed with me so powerfully. They said, I am living in an eerie anticipation.
Wow.
And when they said it was a client, and when she said it, it hit me that is where we are as a people. Because COVID-19 just seemed to be lingering and morphing into more dangerous and more crazy things. So you are living in an eerie anticipation. That is anxiety.
Yeah.
That is anxiety of the highest level. People who have never dealt with mental health challenges are now dealing with it. People who have been diagnosed have been exacerbated. And so you're talking about everybody being pushed in a very difficult place. That is why Trinidad and Tobago is as difficult as it is now. That is why the world is as difficult as it is. Because everybody is on edge. Everybody is eerie anticipating, am I going to get it today? Am I going to get it tomorrow? Do I take the vaccine? Do I send my child to school or not? If I lose my work, what happens then? Who is going to take care of my family if I die today or tomorrow? You could very well imagine people just dying. Yeah. And so what happens to your family if you're not prepared financially and otherwise? So you're talking about a complex level of trauma. Now, Natalie, what I have recognized, and I said for 2022, I'm going to change the narrative in terms of how we cope. Because we have been taught to cope holistically. We talk about, I'm feeling unwell, or I am feeling good, Trinidad, I'm feeling good now, yeah. I know what's going on. But what we have not been doing, Natalie, we have not been paying attention to the various factors of our individual places in our life. Now, let me break that down. We tend to look at life from a holistic perspective in terms of the entirety of you. But what I want to teach people to do in this pandemic, because it ain't going nowhere soon, we have to begin to look at the individual areas of your life and take stock, take count, take an audit on which area is not doing too well. Because chances are when you try to treat the overall you, you may miss. So for example...
But what if you have 3 and 4 and 5 areas not doing well? Let's say all right, let's say you're a single mother. So you're already at a disadvantage, probably not having the kind of support that you'd want in raising a child. And let's say you work in the food industry and there was a time when that was closed. So now you're unemployed. And this whole idea of vaccine comes up, but you're hesitant because, which area you deal with, Hanif?
No, and you see, those are the external areas, Natalie, so you brought up a good point. We have to pay attention to the external and the internal. Now, you spoke about your body, your mind, your soul. I can't sing like you, right? And I wouldn't try. But when you talk about the internal, it is linked to the external. But the problem is, the external challenges, unfortunately, are what they are. And unfortunately, I may not be able to help you to get a job. So that remains a part of the layer.
But you can help me to help me to cope with not having the
correct.
job.
And so that now moves into our internal factors. So when you look at the internal factor, what I've been encouraging my clients to do is to draw a circle of your life. Your emotional, your spiritual, your psychological.
God have mercy. I taking this assignment seriously because
you draw a
last
circle.
year I thought I was going mad. I kid you
So
not.
tell me when you're ready. And for
All
those
right,
of you
so
out
a
there, get
circle.
paper and pen. So you put the dot in the middle. That's a real nice circle you draw there. You get licks in school to draw a circle.
No, I was always good with my pen until nerve damage
that's
messed
a
up my
perfect
hands.
circle. And so now let's put portions of your life. Make your life into domains. So it's spirituality part of your life.
Yes.
You put a part for spirituality. Let's put a part for your physiological self, for your physical wellness. Right? So you spoke about some physical ailments and you had to go in hospital. So what part of your life?
Hold on, because I'm taking this assignment seriously. The physical part of my life is crap. So I go make a small part of the circle then.
No. You put
Make
it as
big.
big.
Up.
Yes.
Oh, because that's a serious problem. Oh.
That is so what
But
I
you say I
have.
wanted to minimize it on paper now so that it don't take over my life because that's what happened last year.
No, but we have to recognize it first.
All right.
So that we could treat with it.
All
and we
right.
need to recognize it in its realness. So if that is a big percentage of your life, then you need to put a big representation.
All right, it has a big one. Now.
Right, and then you put the other areas, for example, your emotional, whatever. Natalie, what you need to start to do now is we need to start to tackle as individuals those areas. So what about the physical that is causing you the distress? How can we treat with the physical aspect of your life? What is your spiritual? Am I spiritually weak? So in that case, do I need to seek my spiritual advisor? How am I? Because a lot of people in the pandemic has lost faith, has lost hope.
True.
You understand? So people are now needing to say, how do I build? So Natalie, what I'm saying to people is if we begin to deconstruct the whole of you and you pay particular attention to the areas that are causing you the most distress, then we will see a better on the outside so that you will be able to deal better with the things that are outside.
But I think on a whole as well is that if you treat with something, as you know, the Bible has a thing that if something offends you, cut it off. I think that if you deal with that particular thing, automatically the other areas of your life improve because once you can get that, because it's the psychological, your psychology is amazing, is that I know for a fact that if I get these hands fixed today, I will probably fix everything else because I'm so grateful and happy that, I have my hands and I can do with them what I used to do or probably even more.
So Natalie, let me walk with you. Put back your circle. I want people to make sure they see your circle.
All right.
Right? Now,
my circle
now the point you make there, if we are able to deal with the physical aspect, chances are, as you say, I call it the peripheral challenges. When people come to see me, you come out 1,000 issues, But I just tell you, put up your index finger, and if you could point out one finger on the most important thing in your life, once we deconstruct that, process that, and deal with that, even if it remains what it is, everything else around you, 99 out of the 100 issues just start disappearing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things are driven by the major area or the major trauma that you are dealing with. Now remember, trauma is an emotional and a behavioral response to an unfortunate event. Now when we deconstruct that and we help you to look at that area, other areas in your life will start to go good because your mind is less occupied on that. You are now understanding what that is. You understand how it impacts your life. You understand how it interfaces with other areas of your life.
But Hanif, how many people do you think have that ability to sit, look at the pandemic and to say, you know what, I went through this, this is what is happening, so that we can even get to the point of employing coping mechanisms?
And that is why I changed. I mean, over the Christmas, I really sat long and hard about how to tackle 2022. And what you're saying is important, and that is why in 2022, my teaching methodology, the way I approach the pandemic, has now changed because there is no end. You see, a lot of us were trained to deal with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But how do you deal with a revolving crisis? And I'm also a field traumatologist, so I deal with crises as well. How do you deal with a rain that keeps falling? How do you deal with a flood that keeps rising? You understand?
When the rainfall catch the water. So.
And not only that, we build a boat. So before it was survival in the water, now we have to figure out how to survive on top of the water. And that is what this pandemic is teaching us. How do we survive in the crisis that we are in? And if we are to look at life from a different perspective, where we are examining the things within us that is causing us distress, and we build resiliency around those things, then you realize that even you living in the pandemic itself, you will be better for it. You will cope better. You will be able to live differently.
So you think this is an opportunity for us to take stock then? Because, I mean, now you have to, it's a whole different circumstance living in a pandemic. So do you think it's an opportunity for us to grow and to understand more how to deal with trauma and how to adapt to
we
situations?
have been, over the last 2.5 years, we have been in crisis mode. All of our things from government all the way down to the common man was in response to a crisis. The crisis is not ending. So now you have to change from living in a crisis mode to living in a survival. So now we have to begin to survive the crisis, because no longer are we trying to outlive or fight. It is what it is. We are where we are.
Because we can't stay in that crisis mode.
Correct.
It will be more damaging to our psyche in the long run.
Definitely. Crisis, by definition, is a short event. 2 years is not a short event. So we have moved past crisis now. We need to now begin to survive. And we have to teach people. So we now need to teach our children, parents, professionals. That is where, in my view, our role and responsibility must now go. Because whether you like it or not, this is not leaving in 2022, nor 2023. It is going to morph, it is going to change. And so we have to begin to morph and change along with it. We have to begin to survive.
How do we get there, though? How do we, because a lot of people get stuck. I found myself stuck last year. I was able to recognize it. But the thing is that even though I recognized it, it was not easy for me to move out of it. So how do you get people from that point of saying, okay, get out of the crisis, get to survival mode, get to live-in mode?
You said it just now. A lot of people, to get there, Natalie, we have to recognize in the first instance. And too many of us are still stuck in crisis mode. We are not recognizing. So the very first thing we need to do is recognize that I am not okay.
How do you do that? It's not natural for some people to recognize what they're going through.
And so that is where we come in to help them. Because you wouldn't wake up and decide, all you know is I am feeling good. And you're feeling good tomorrow, and the next day, and the next week, and the next month. So we need to recognize, why am I not feeling good? What is causing me to not feel good? And so a big part of this, Natalie, as well, from a national perspective, the messaging has to change. Because our messaging is still crisis response.
What do you think? Messaging from who, though?
Well, definitely from the government all the way down. We must now begin. If you notice, you know what is different around the world? Deaths are still happening. Numbers are still rising. Canada, England, Australia, and all these places, these things are still there.
Yeah.
But you don't hear it from that perspective. You hear it from a survival perspective. You hear it from, we have moved. And if you are telling the people we have moved and you coaching them and guiding them in moving forward, surviving in a healthy and productive way, your entire mind frame will change.
So you think the government's messaging is still in crisis mode?
Yeah, we
telling
are
people
still.
there is a crisis and
Correct.
they should respond
Correct.
to it.
Now, we have to balance that as well with people misunderstanding what that means, because in Trinidad, sometimes we not in a crisis mood mean come on, let me wine and jam. You understand?
Yeah.
So we have to be careful how you message that. And so the teaching has to be, we have to survive this. We have to live with this. And so in order for us to do that, we must now change our cognitive understanding. I made a statement in 2020 early on a different talk show. And I said what we need to do is cognitive behavior therapy for our country. We have to change the way we behave, the way we see, the way we interact. And in order to do that, we must teach and guide. And in order to teach and guide, we must be very present. We must be forthright. We have to change how we say it, what we say it, from baby all the way up.
You know, this is one of the most difficult things to change in a people is its culture and it's
Correct.
the way we think. So
Correct.
if we need that cognitive behavioral therapy, how are we going to get there? People don't even want to hear you once they say they need to change something.
And that is the difficulty. People change for two reasons and two reasons only. When you are faced with a serious crisis, or when you have no choice but to. And I think we are at that place as a country. Those two things.
Yeah.
We are dealing with a crisis because death is knocking on almost every door, and we are at a place where we just don't have a choice but to. You have to figure out where in that continuum you find yourself. You have to figure out how do you and your family survive that change. What are you going to do? And I always say, Natalie, you need to create your own circle. You talk about having 4 people, unfortunately not him, right? So you need to know who are your people in your circle.
Yeah.
You have to teach within your circle. You have to guide within your circle. And each person in your circle must do the same. And so if you look at how that will start to build, that is how we get the change. But we must take the personal responsibility to say, this is 2022 and this is here to stay. So how can I as an individual protect myself, protect the people in my inner circle in every area? I came here, this girl, the assistant on production, she's spraying everything. So she's taking charge of her area to make sure that people are safe. And so once you do that, I spray, she's spraying, all of us spraying, we keep safe. So you build within your own circle. And that has to happen from home. And that is where I want to see more family messages coming out from the authorities. How do we keep families safe? Tips to keep family, how do we do those things? That is where the cognitive behavior is coming in. That is where we are beginning to change our mind.
Then is it that we're having even more of a crisis because of the messaging and, you know, not so much because of the pandemic itself?
I think that has always been the case, Natalie. When I studied field traumatology, which is crisis, as a crisis responder, the very first thing we always look at is communication. Because you have, in the first instance, a crisis, but then you have a secondary and tertiary crisis. Most times you have crises following the main crisis, and that comes because of communication. How we communicate within a crisis. How do we help people to understand the battlefield, to understand where to go, how to go? That is critical. That is why you have drills for fire over and over and over, so that people could understand in a crisis, this is the communication. And I think we have been in a communication crisis, not because they probably don't know what to do, but mainly because we have so many competition in terms of voices throughout the world. And I think that has been the major downfall of what we are dealing with. You have a government who is trying to navigate the best way they know how with information, and then you have everybody else with information on Facebook, iBook, every book. And so when everybody get information keep coming in, and you don't know who to believe now because you are skeptical because it is new, they're asking me to do things that I don't know, and they're asking you to do things that we have been doing all our lives. Wash your hand, don't come in my face, you understand?
Yeah.
They're asking us to do things that we know. But because how it is coming, we are not understanding it, we are not believing it. Because now, for every one sentence, there are 15 sentences that can make that one sentence seem as if it is wrong. And so communication has been the major crisis in this crisis.
Wow. So then we obviously have to change the messaging. So let's just talk about, that one man who is there, probably would have experienced some kind of loss as a result of COVID, probably has contracted COVID. For him, this idea of, recognizing what he's going through, trying to move out of crisis mode into survival mode, into living with a virus mode. These steps are not something that he may even see or think of. What do you say to that person at this point? Because as I said, it's not natural for some people to be able to recognize what they're going through. And realistically is that if you can't recognize what's happening, you don't know what to
help,
treat.
you can't fix.
You don't know what to treat. Yeah.
My first thing I always say to people is grieve. This is what you call complex grief, because it is unnatural. You didn't grow old and die, or
Yeah.
So I say to people, allow the process of grieving. Too often in this crisis, we are not allowed to grieve. You're going from one to the next because you have to survive, as you say. So I say to people all the time, allow the grieving process. The grieving process teaches us a lot of things. It helps us to identify our emotion, how we feel, when we feel it, why we feel it. It also helps us to understand what we do as a result of the emotions we feel. And if we skip the grieving process, we will just be acting, and we wouldn't know how and what we are acting to. So I tell people, in the first instance, allow yourself to grieve. The people around you, allow the people to grieve. Don't put a time limit on the grief. You understand? And so that is the first step. Now, when you are going through complex grief, you have to understand when you have gotten to a point where you need help to help process and understand what is going on. Because for many, they don't understand why. You just got in the hospital and that's it. Sometimes 2-3 members of an individual family has been wiped out. And so that makes it even more complex. So you need to get that help. You need to talk. That's the second area. You need to talk. Sometimes people say, but talking helps you to get it off your chest in a real way. There is power in speech. And so you need to be able to speak about how you feel in a very safe environment where you don't have to feel inhibited or whatever in terms of what you say, how you say it. So you just need to grieve and you need to talk about it. You also have to be understanding in terms of your environment. So the people in your environment must now understand what you are going through and help to support.
Yeah.
Your physiological support is important. Sleep, eat, those things are critical when you're going through a crisis as well. So those are some basic steps that I could help you to get through once you're dealing with complex grief indeed.
Yeah. And if we do have to leave it there, but I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise this morning. And I hope for those of you out there who are listening that you take heed. If you're going through it, learn to grieve, learn to move out of that crisis mode, learn that you need the things that you need to do so that you're able to help yourself and know your circle too. That's definitely critical.